Hey guys, welcome back to New Wall Carpentry Solutions. In this video, we're going to tackle how I actually decide to go about making these custom T-shaped moldings. This T-shaped molding is actually going to allow me to build my mutton bars. I plan to actually use like a half lap assembly process, but I actually want the perimeter boards or the perimeter pieces to this mutton bar to actually wrap it inside of the dado that we cut on the stiles and rails for the door. To make that make sense, essentially I want the outside pieces before I make my grid pattern. I want them to have a rabbet that actually receives into the dados that I've already cut into my door pieces. That way when I go into the assembly process, if I pre-assemble my half lap structure, it can all be glued in all at one time. So I start this process over on the table saw. Well, actually I start off initially milling a bunch of stock to the same thickness, but then I have to actually take the rest of it over to the table saw with the dado set in there and actually cut the two rabbets. First thing I have to do is actually set up my fence to make sure that the rabbet will be centered on the stock that I make, which after doing all that and getting it dialed in on some test pieces, first thing I do is make one pass on the left hand side, and that actually removes most of the dado. You see here there's still just a little bit of a paper thin material that needs to be removed. If my dado set was a little bit wider, it would have actually cut this full entire rabbet, but that little bit is fairly easy enough to clean up with just, my hand or a chisel. So now after that I have to make my second pass, which will then create the T-shaped profile. It leaves me probably about a 1/4 inch reveal from both sides of the stiles. So essentially this molding is 1 1/4 inch and on the fatter side, and the rabbet that I cut actually fits perfectly inside the dado. Since my door panel is actually 1 3/4 inch, that leaves me a 1/4 inch reveal, where this molding after sitting into the dado actually has a reveal on both sides of the door. You can actually see how it slides in there. That little bit of a reveal will kind of be another step down or an additional shadow line when I actually assemble my full mutton bar assembly. But with this test fit, the next thing I need to do is actually run the other few pieces over on the table saw. I decided just run long sticks that I'll cut down to length afterwards. So after this stick, I believe I'll run like 2 or 3 more over on the table saw just to make sure I have enough and extras. So I'll get back to you guys after we finish running everything on the table saw. now with all the rough stock made, I'm able to actually come over here to the miter saw and start cutting all the miters, because the exterior frame of my mutton bars I actually want to be a complete picture frame. I do plan to come back with a router bit to add a chamfer to it, so I want all the corners to actually have a miter there versus a standard butt joint if I did a full half lap for everything. So I'm actually going to miter and assemble the picture frame and actually have all the half laps or the grid pattern interlap or intersect all of my picture frames that I'm planning to make. So to do this, instead of breaking out a tape measure, I figured it'd be a lot easier just to cut a 45 on one end of the board, stake it down close to the door and make a mark on the back side, and then kind of inch my way toward that cut, just to make sure that it's a nice snug fit, but I don't have to break out the tape measure. It's a few steps back and forth, but it's not too much, it's not gonna hurt me. So I'm gonna repeat this process until I have all my picture frame pieces cut. And then after that, the next thing we need to do is actually start laying out all the measurements and everything else we need to do so we can create our half laps. That'll be something that we tackle over in the next video. So right now, you guys get to enjoy me, doing the process of making all my cuts. A few tips that I can give is that you actually want to be able to walk back to your mark. You can go straight for your mark, but again, I do have extra pieces, but it's good not to waste it. So if I do cut it a little bit long, it's nothing to take it back to the miter saw and take another nibble off of it. But again, I don't want to shoot for my mark on my first chop. I would rather nibble or walk my way to my cut, just to make sure that, again, I'm not wasting material and that everything fits nice and snug as you see here. I also don't want to force it in all the way, because I do have to take this all apart to make sure I can actually assemble everything, because none of this has glue. So I just want to make sure that the fit is snug, it's not too tight, but I'm able to actually work it in there. Another really good tip that I can give is that now that I have the door clamped up, when I did do this initial clamp up here, I made sure that everything was perfectly square, because if it wasn't, that would also throw off these measurements here. I wanted to make sure again that the door is racked properly and everything else, so all my measurements are as accurate as possible, because when I go to the assembly process, I really don't want to be fighting trying to assemble everything, or trying to fight with clamps or beat the parts around just to make sure everything lines up perfectly. I will say that I did do one thing in this process that I probably would do differently next time. I never had to do multiple divided panels like this. Typically it's always like one or two pieces of glass, and I wanted to do solid divided light versus doing like a simulated divided light. But I do have another idea that I will pull off for the next time, which I'll probably actually take a rabbet bit and cut out the front side of my dado to create a rabbet on my actual door frame, and then I'll make my entire glass mutton bar section actually sit directly over it versus having it rabbet in there. That way I can actually install it afterwards. That's a lot, but again, it would make this assembly process that you guys will see me go through a little bit later a lot easier. But I'm actually going to let the rest of this run. We're going to cut the rest of these pieces, and I'll show you guys what it looks like when I'm trying to test fit my my little perimeter for my mutton bars. And as you guys can see here, I have all my pieces cut. I'm able to kind of just rough out the square that it's going to make. I do later actually put everything inside the actual door frame just to kind of make sure that again that everything fits nicely. Because it is rabbeted, I can't do it with the door assembler like this, but I can actually set it down into the lip, rest the rabbet on the face of the door, and make sure all the miters still fit into the corners. Just to give myself a general test fit. But in the next video, we're going to go into actually laying out all the half laps and cutting everything over on the crosscut sled. So if you guys have enjoyed, make sure you guys leave me a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.